Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to Euro Projects, the first of one of these seminars for many years. Several people will have experienced the Euro Projects seminars every week during lockdown and COVID. We haven't done one for several months, but we've been waiting for a topic of note. And I think the main topic of note, if what you're telling us is anything to go by, is definitely what you should be paying people, what's going on with pay rises, and what's going to happen during the course of 2023 in this regard. And it's certainly been a year of turmoil as far as these things have been are concerned. So welcome to the salary survey report for the UK engineering and manufacturing sectors, which many of you are involved with. And I'll just give you a little run through of what you can expect from the report. This is a preview of the report. The report is actually now published in white paper format, and we're looking forward to being able to send that out to you within the next few days. So just a bit of background for those of you that don't know us, as well as maybe some do on the call. Euro Projects was originally part of an engineering consultancy and a management consultancy. So this kind of thing actually is second nature to us. We're not just here to make placements. We're not just here to do recruitment. We're part of, if you like, the wider ecosystem of the employment world that we operate in. We've been doing recruitment, technical and executive recruitment, for 27 years, and we're predominantly doing that within the engineering and manufacturing sectors. Some of my colleagues from Euro Projects will probably not be surprised, but I was quite astonished to see that our small team, when you add up our combined recruitment experience, is 139 years. And as Ian Yoxon's always telling me, in recruitment, that's like dog years, I mean, that's almost like 500 years of experience. We focus on permanent, contract and interim appointments. I thought I'd also give you a background to the scope of what we do annually. So over 27 years, we've been probably doing around 300 placements per annum. Now, they're actual placements. We will work on more assignments than just the number of placements that are made. So I think we're probably reviewing upwards of 20,000 candidates every year. Now that gives you a sense of the data that we've drawn from to pull this salary information together for you. And as I go through the presentation, I'll draw on the experts at Euro Projects who deliver our recruitment services and the advice and support that we're hopefully going to share with you today. We have a report that looks at the critical highlights of 2022. I think it's fair to say 2022 has shaped what is happening this year with regard to pay increases. We're going to look ahead at what we think 2023 looks like. What are the in-demand roles that we think are going to be the most difficult to find? What else are you going to have to offer in terms of wider employee benefits? And then we're going to preview the specific roles and sectors in which we operate. Now, I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of what this presentation could have looked like, but I promise you it won't. This is what's in the presentation. If you can see what I'm holding up on my camera now, lots of tables, lots of data, lots of numbers. I mean, you might fall asleep if I went through that. So we're going to try and keep it punchy, and you will all get a copy of this afterwards so that you can actually read the real detail. And if you want to come back to us and ask us questions about specific numbers, of course, you're very welcome to. And then we're just going to look at what is going on with regard to recruitment and retention in 2023. So, there we go, the critical highlights of 2022, and I broke it down by quarter. So if you look at like the three things that happened that probably shaped last year's salary figures more than anything in each quarter, was in Q1, we had the continuation of what we call the post pandemic recruiting frenzy. There was a huge backlog of orders in most people's firms. There'd been a lot of turmoil, and all of a sudden everybody wants to recruit. And that was going on right through 2021 and certainly into the early part of 2022. We then, of course, had inflation. The Ukraine crisis comes along and it impacts fuel and energy prices, which again has a huge knock-on effect with pay. And what we started to see in the early part of 2022 was a very tentative, robust pay rise. So rather than, well, do we give them 2%? Do we give them 2.5%? It was like, we think it's going to be a big pay rise this year because of what's happening, but it was still averaged out at 2.5% to 5%. But what we were also hearing is we'll probably give another one when we can see the shape of the graph of what inflation's looking like later on in the year. So that was quarter one. In quarter two, the number of UK vacancies peaks at 1,144,000. I mean, that's a huge number of vacancies that are unfilled. And many of these are still unfilled because although it peaked at that, it's softened, but it's still a huge number. We saw during this time that hybrid working became the most requested benefit. So people were now starting to think, well, if I'm going back into work, changing employer, I actually want to go with an employer that is going to give me that level of flexibility. And I've started to learn only within the last few weeks that there are two sorts of hybrid working. There is work and remote, and then there is remote and work. So these are, you either expect people to be in the office most of the time, but they can work away some of the time, or you expect them to be, or you allow them to be remote most of the time, and they can come in the office some of the time. So there are two sorts of hybrid working now. I think that's going to be something that we see more differentiation on going forward. And what we noticed was that counter offers went up by 60% on pre-pandemic levels to retain key employees. What do we mean by this? These are the offers to keep someone within your business that has been offered a job somewhere else. That went up by 60% on what we previously experienced. Then quarter three comes, and we see the first reduction in demand in over 13 months for recruitment. Now, I don't think we did personally as a business within the engineering and manufacturing sector, but within the UK, we did see a drop. What we also saw, and this is a leading indicator for the market as far as we're concerned, replacing someone became the primary reason for a vacancy, not growth, not strategy or a new marketplace or diversification, a replacement. So although it showed that people were moving and that they needed replacing, these vacancies weren't being added to by additional growth. And the other thing that we saw come through in Q3 was the start of one-off hardship payments. So many firms that had maybe been hesitant to give that bigger pay rise at the early part of the year recognised that their employees were under a lot of pressure, and they gave payments of between £350 and about £2,000 just to support the cost of living crisis that many people were feeling and worrying about the energy prices. Energy caps came off. And then in quarter four, we see that in the last 9 months, 600,000 55 to 60-year-olds took early retirement and left the employment market. Again, a huge hole in the availability of people that we can have within our businesses. Pay pressure remains high. We see inflation peak at 11.1%. And interestingly, we also see that rising business costs mean that senior executives are starting to worry about what they earn. And they're starting to say things to us like, we aren't giving ourselves a pay rise because we are actually in survival. So we've got high pay of workforce wages, we've got high electricity bills, we've got higher raw material costs. Actually, we can't afford to take a pay rise because our profits are being subdued. So that's what we saw during 2022. So as we move into 2023, if we can wait for 2023 to start, there we go. What we think is going to happen looking ahead. Well, we're already in Q1. We have seen inflation start to reduce from its peak last year. We're starting to see that internal promotions to retain key members of staff are, if you like, outbidding getting somebody fresh and new in. Now, this is part of a retention strategy because if someone's being promoted, they feel like they don't want to move elsewhere, but it's also out of necessity. Many of these companies have tried looking elsewhere and they haven't found the person that they can bring in at the right level. We've started to see more public sector workers migrate into the private sector. Although the public sector is getting some fairly big headline news percentage pay rises, they haven't had a pay rise for 5 years. So when we hear 7% mentioned, what we're not hearing is that that 7% has been delayed for a number of years in many sectors of the public services. So we are seeing more people start to look elsewhere, especially those that have got transferable skills. So what do we think is going to happen going forward? Well, we've been talking to you about what you plan to do, and we've combined that data, and we think that pay awards during Q2 are likely to be between 3 and 5%. We think that middle-level management roles will increase to backfill the managers that were promoted into executive positions earlier on in the year. And we think that candidate mobility is going to reduce as a mild recession starts to make them feel that job security is more important than moving elsewhere. Now, my crystal ball's getting hazier as we look further into the year, but we then think that because of this mild recession in Q3, we're likely to see that many businesses leave the market. We think that some businesses that have struggled, they've been living off a C-bill or they've been living off soft loans. We think that it's going to get tougher for them, which is going to mean that they're going to put people into the recruitment market for us. And I mentioned that at the bottom there. Increased workforce availability as unviable firms fail. Now, those of you that were on these calls 2 years ago, when we were talking about recruitment and no one was recruiting, it was all lockdown, we talked about graduates, and we had lots of graduates, and I said, snap these graduates up now because they won't be around when this pandemic is over. Well, guess what? We can't get graduates. So we're going to see graduate salaries starting to spike, because if you can't get those people that have got the expertise and the ready skills that you need, you're going to have to bring them in and train them up. And that's the market that everyone is now looking at. Then as we look further still towards the back end of this year, we think that the unemployment rate is probably going to go up a bit, maybe 4.3% is predicted. It's still considered full employment. Mergers and acquisitions activity is likely to increase as certain firms buy out others that are failing. That creates opportunities always for new turnaround executives. So we think the executive market's going to pick up a lot towards the end of this year. And something else that we talked about hybrid working earlier, that's going to come in and it's going to start to be heard more and more, but not right now. But later on, I think, is the 4-day week. I think we're going to start to hear more about people wanting to be able to consolidate their working week into 4 days, not 5. And that might be a recruitment or a retention tool that we need to focus on. Now, very quickly, well, who's in demand and who is, if you like, not so in demand? Well, I think you've only got to drive down the road to see the amount of banners and posters saying that we are recruiting to know that there aren't many jobs that aren't in demand at the moment. But the real hot jobs that we see at present are operations directors and managers and supply chain professionals and project managers. I'm going to come on to those in more detail later. Sales engineers and managers, and IT systems engineers and managers. I've mentioned graduates, along with graduates, apprentices, and other lower level support staff within your commercial teams, that's administrators. And it's largely as businesses focus on efficiency. They're trying to get more productivity, they're trying to automate, and they are looking for business growth, but where is it going to come from in a recessionary environment? Now, those softening areas of demand, still very difficult to get hold of, especially anyone in HR listening to this now. You are still in demand, but not as much as you were when you needed to sort out all those furlough payments and things, along with your accountants there. Production operatives, maybe that's a result of automation becoming a bit more favourable. Anything really that is focused on immediate return is in demand, but we've just not quite got it like we have in those other professions I mentioned. During COVID, we were off the scale looking for people to replace salespeople. In fact, again, I see several people on here who are sales trainers and from the sales engineering marketplace. Did we ever think we'd go and visit a customer again? Well, it's what everybody wants right now. But before, we were looking at more digital ways of selling our products. That's waned a little bit now. And customer service type roles, and certainly reception roles, they aren't in demand, because I think we've got this new way of working where we've got more direct access to the people we want to talk to rather than layers of administration. So I think what's driving that long-term lack of demand is back office automation and possibly outsourcing. So that's the picture for the different occupations and where they are going. Very quickly on employee benefits, because they form part of the round package, what we call hard benefits. So these are cash equivalents. Pension, if you're offering a pension, low is considered 3.5%. High is 6% for your people, and the executive salary, the executive pension range, 9 to about 12.5%. So it gives you an indication. Holidays. Low is now 22 to 25, and woe betide anybody who tries to hire anybody on less than 25, really. It's really difficult to try and attract people on that basis. High is 27, but we're seeing it more and more. And executive average days is 27 days holiday. Death in service, well, we hope we never have to worry about this, but it is important for our families. The average is 3. The executive average is 3. We've got a couple of outliers that we know are paying 5 times annual salary. And then healthcare. I think, again, it's come to the fore. The NHS is in the news every night. We've had a lot of problems through the COVID period. So healthcare is a key benefit now. For the lower level employees, the main workforce, it tends to be a money purchase scheme. Then as we get higher up the status of people that are awarded healthcare, it tends to be just the employee, and then for executives, it's employee and family. So again, these are key areas that you can differentiate with your benefits package. Now we're going to review specific roles. Now these are going to be more relevant to certain people than others here, but bear with me because I think there's something for everyone on the call. And we're going to start off with executive pay. What we noticed during the early part of 2022 is that larger salaries were being offered than normal to executives to attract key players. Now, those people that were otherwise in an executive role that weren't moving typically got a rise by inflation, and they pretty much had what everybody else was being offered within their organization. There are some exceptions, and operations roles increased disproportionately to all other executive pay. And we will come on to that more later. The other thing that we identified by talking to quite a few senior people within our clients is that, as I mentioned before, senior executives are freezing pay to cope with the additional costs that their business is finding, which is squeezing profitability. Eddie Smith, who's with us, he specialises in executive search. Eddie, what are you finding in this area that stands out to you most? And if I could just sort of give my voice a rest and people can hear yours for a change.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So over the last couple of years, I think there's been less pressure on executive salaries. The guys have not had as much of an increase at that senior level because it's less acute, really, than at the mid-level. So I don't think the exec salary levels have changed massively, whereas at the mid-level, people have been more hit by the cost of living crisis and therefore have needed that more of an uplift to change jobs. Otherwise, it's just not worth doing. But what has happened in the exec salary packet is that obviously the bonus side of things plays a much higher proportion of their overall earnings. And in the absence of that bonus, then moving forward into the next year, anybody that looks to move from an exec position will probably have an even closer eye on the financial performance of a business historically and moving forward, so they can see what their potential package will look like. Because in the absence of bonus over the last 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, looking forward, guys on the exec team will want to see where their extra income can come from when it comes to bonuses. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Eddie. We're just going to move on to manufacturing operations. And I think this has been one of the standout areas for change. What we've noticed that's driving the market here are process improvements. Everybody's in a dash for productivity. But not only that, they're in a dash to keep the plant running. We've got one client who I don't know whether there's on at the moment, but they said the pump that keeps the machine that runs their foundry running comes from the Ukraine. So they're struggling just to source parts and actually keep their equipment in operation. We've then got strategic automation, which is, if you like, our industry 4.0. And then we've got a backlog of orders that we're trying to fulfill. Ian, you're our expert and our primary consultant in the manufacturing sector. What have you said? What have you seen that you can sort of add some colour to these slides with, please? Is Ian Yoxon on the call?
Thanks, Steve. I think the key thing here is the sorts of people that are being asked for are all about productivity and making it happen. So production managers, operations directors, people that can bring leadership and direction to the organization of getting the product out the door, quality, problem solving, making sure there's less scrap, but also production planners and schedulers. So it's all about productivity and getting products out of the door. A key stat for this area, production operations from 30k salaries up to the senior leadership team, from the first draft of the job spec to the actual money offered at job stage or offer stage, is something around 18% as an average. So to put some meat on the bone, 32k becomes 38k, 55 becomes 65. That's the kind of pressure that we've got in our market at the moment on production and operations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. Not what everybody wants to hear, but you kind of do want to hear it if it's the difference between keeping your operations people or not. Technical and engineering, well, you know, this is certainly where I cut my teeth nearly 30 years ago when I started Euro projects, and it doesn't seem to sort of feel any different, but I think it's got more acute because I saw that there were 60,000 open vacancies for technical and engineering staff in 2022. And it's probably because we are getting more technical. We've been on this exponential curve of digitization. We're drastically under-resourced in this profession and have been for many years. We then saw a 44% drop in technical job applications in 2022. And so if you are looking for someone who is technical, you've got to pay a lot more in order to compete, and you've got to be scrutinizing your people all the time to make sure that you are going to retain them. Luke, you look after this area of the business for our clients at Euro Projects. What would you say that clients on this call need to know in terms of recruiting and retaining their technical teams?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. As you kind of say, really, demand for engineers has outstripped supply for pretty much as long as we can remember. But I think there's some recent trends that have had an even greater impact on this. So businesses at the moment are invested in product development and technology development because they want to stay ahead of their competitors, which obviously requires additional technical expertise. There's a need for skills in some sectors where there's a big shift in technology development. We can look at electrification within the transportation sectors, robotics, software, communication technology is all good examples of this. And then I think when you throw that all together with an increase in the cost of living, businesses are having to dig deep, not only to attract good engineers and good technical people, but to also retain the best engineers within their businesses, because their competitors are also looking to recruit 9 times out of 10.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Luke. I'm just responding to some messages about the slide deck being shared afterwards. We are attempting to record this, and also we will share with everybody the slide deck and the report when we send it out. So, but thank you very much for that insight as well, Luke. Now, they're the sort of the big headline areas that we recruit in. If we were to be a little bit more specific of certain roles and certain disciplines, program and project management, that's gone really busy for us. And I think it's because more project management content is now involved in an engineering contract than perhaps ever before. And if you've got very technical people that used to also do the project management, they are now too busy just doing the technical side. So project manager can maybe ease some of that burden for those overstretched staff. And why are they difficult to find? Well, if you didn't know, and there's a lot of Midlands people on here, and I've got this coming through my backyard, HS2 at £87 billion is currently the world's second largest infrastructure project. And we've also got Hinkley Point Power Station C, which is employing 22,000 people. So that's absorbing a huge amount of resource out of the marketplace. We've got purchasing and supply chain, as Ian's just alluded to, this is under huge pressure at the moment. We've got to negotiate a lot harder because we are in an inflationary environment. So buyers are really important to our clients at the moment. We mentioned before about the client that's struggling to keep his foundry running because of a disruption due to Ukraine. So sourcing alternative supplies and parts is really important. We've still got logistical issues caused by the pandemic. And we've also got a lot of increased demand on resources because globally everybody wants the same raw materials or the same products. We mentioned earlier about the resurgence in sales and marketing, and sales engineers particularly in our marketplace has gone completely off the scale. And really, if you find one who is suitable for your job, then I don't think you're going to get a bigger shortlist than that. Paradoxically, we also got used to working in a different way during the pandemic, and we were recruiting more internal salespeople that could work remotely. And I think the combination of the difficulty in getting face-to-face sales engineers now and that new way of operating means that internal salespeople have increased a lot. As we mentioned earlier, e-commerce was very important previously. It's not gone away, it has softened, but also marketing automation. On the marketing side, it's all about IT systems using marketing rather than perhaps the more colourful way of marketing that we might have done traditionally. Danny, you specialise in recruiting a lot of sales engineers for our clients. And what I'm just interested in you sharing is which sectors are looking for salespeople the most that you feel are keeping you the busiest?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I think our customers across a variety of sectors, to be fair, have really strong order books moving into 2023. But I think the key ones, just to quickly highlight where we're seeing increased demand for salespeople. So the rail and transportation sector, the infrastructure, as well as the technology systems that are used on trains, and the automotive manufacturing sector. So specifically within that for connected and autonomous vehicles, the military and defence industry, alongside some resurgence with the aerospace industry, and then finally the medical device manufacturing, which has remained fairly strong.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Finance and accounting, we talked about earlier, along with HR, it peaked during the pandemic because it was so important to mainly organise things like furlough, to do cash flow projections for CBIL loans, etc. I think it's certainly softened since 2 years ago, but I think it's going to come back because forecasting and cash flow management in a recession is what's going to keep some firms alive. Along with that, hand in hand, investor relations. But I think the key thing that we've seen more recently is that we don't just recruit an isolated finance person. The finance people that we recruit now are far more integrated with the whole of the organisation, and they are able to add a lot more value if they are pan business rather than just in a finance tower. And I think if you are recruiting these sorts of people, they're the kind of things you need to look at in order to attract them, or if you want to keep them and you want to involve them in a wider part of your business. HR and health, safety and environmental, again, that's an area that was off the scale during the pandemic. Furlough, staff communications, remote working. There were a lot of restructures and there were a lot of redundancies, say 2 or 3 years ago. What we're now seeing is what's keeping them busy is the management of new working practices and this hybrid and remote working that needs very close management. Everything's got to be measured so that you at least know that the people that work for you are doing what's expected of them. And that's performance management. And you've got a recession potentially coming and you need to make sure that everyone is performing during that time. And then why are we all here? Well, because we need to know about compensation and benefits planning. So these are the areas that are driving the demand for these types of people within our clients. We do recruit IT people for some IT companies. But we also recruit a lot of IT people for engineering and manufacturing companies. And what we're seeing that's driving demand here is remote working has increased the need for cybersecurity. Automated systems mean that there is a greater connectivity of IT, and SAP and ERP are much stronger in the area of demand than we would normally expect. We have lost outsourced partners. In Ukraine. The Ukraine was a very strong hub for IT workers, and those people are no longer available to us. And they were picking up a lot of capacity in the UK IT market. And I think the other key thing, and we've alluded to this previously during the presentation, technology is growing faster than the available resources. Everything is digitizing at a much faster pace, and we're struggling to actually have the resource to keep up with that. And administration. Administration took a real nosedive during the pandemic, and there was a lot of churn involved with that. But I think companies are now recognizing the importance of good admin to support their technical experts and to support their overstretched senior people. And I'm afraid, whichever way you voted, Brexit has caused a lot more administration. And if you are an import or an export company, you will need a lot more admin support in order to navigate the new rules and processes that have been brought in. We're coming towards the end of the presentation. They are the key sectors or disciplines in which we operate. The numbers that you should or shouldn't be paying are in the report, which we'll send out to you. I'd just like to sort of finish with, well, what's your proposition looking like if you're going to attract and retain people for your company? Well, if it's a new role, or it's a role that you're sitting down and appraising somebody with, make sure that that job content is absolutely clear, concise, and measurable. Offer career growth, demonstrate job security, because we see it every time the economy softens. Candidates sort of hunker down, make sure they're hunkering down with you, or you're a safe haven for those that feel vulnerable. The lack of skills and the lack of experience hasn't gone away, particularly in our specific sectors. So you've still got to offer highly competitive salaries. And we looked at what was going on in the engineering market particularly, and that demonstrates that. When you are offering opportunities to people, or when you're reminding your existing team what you're all about, don't forget to demonstrate what investment you're making in technology and the future of your business, especially as we go for this dash for productivity and more automation. And demonstrate team tenure. How long have people worked within your business, so you can actually say that you don't have a high churn, and give people that comfort of security. And provide ongoing training and personal development. I think people are moving now that most salaries have sort of caught up in most businesses. People are now moving, if they are, for that next step and for that opportunity to progress with more input to them. Joe, you and I were talking in your appraisal only last week about what makes a good client for Euro projects. And it certainly ticked a lot of these boxes, but you came out with a few things that I think might be important, particularly if anybody here is working with a recruiter or they're recruiting generally in the marketplace. What should they be looking to offer?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think all the points you mentioned there, they're some of the core key bits really, where we've kind of had a bit more kind of consistency and joy with certain companies is it's been as frictionless as possible, really, in terms of that recruitment process. Now, it's not making sure you're dropping in quality, but it's still remaining thorough. But that speed in terms of that initial CV through to interview, through to offer, it's been quite noticeable between certain companies. I'd say as well, strong communication, throughout as well. That makes quite a big difference, I'd say.
Yeah, brilliant. In fact, I'll just sort of piggyback what you said there, Joe. When it comes to communicating a job offer, that time between someone accepting the job and then someone starting the job, things can go really cool on both sides. And it's up to you to really make sure that you drive communication and you keep that person engaged with your business, so that there isn't that nasty shock, not just a day before, but sometimes on the day, where you get that phone call, or worse, even a text to say, I'm not starting. I've had that counter offer that we talked about, the 60% more of now, and you're back to square one. So definitely keep those lines of communication open and hot during that period of offer acceptance through to start date. When it comes to your process, and I mean this, if you like, in a strategic manner, when you're looking at hiring more people and you're resourcing your business, you've got to try and build in more flexibility, I think, than we have done before. So yes, have the job spec that's got what you want in it, but don't be too prescribed in how you might fulfill that. And could it be done by someone who's part-time or a graduate with training? It's up to you to get the graduate. It's up to you to then give them the training. And could it be done by someone who's remote working, rather than if you always had everybody on the premises? Plan for about 2 to 5 months to find your candidate. As Joe just said, be thorough, but also be very fast at every step. We've mentioned maintaining communication throughout. What hasn't gone away is you've got to recruit for values and for cultural fit. when we came out of the pandemic and there was that recruiting frenzy, I spoke to a client who took someone on that they'd let go during the pandemic. At the time, they seemed quite glad to have let that person go. They were then saying, well, it's the only other person we know that can do the job, and that's now causing them pain. So, you know, make sure that you keep your business as culturally fit and let's say on the tracks of what you want your values to look like as much as possible. Appoint someone who is responsible for making recruitment happen at your end. Make sure that within your business there is someone driving recruitment, because it isn't just a part-time thing that you can maybe put a post on LinkedIn or pop an advert on the internet and hope that you're going to get CVs. You've really got to drive this, and it is a 24/7 operation right now. And demonstrate positivity to all of the people involved in the process throughout the process. Matt, you're working with a lot of companies at the moment and bringing in a lot of new business to Euro projects who probably haven't experienced the Euro projects way of working until now. What would you say you're saying to those companies to make sure that they're able to attract the right people in the right time?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So if you're an employer that's looking to fill a difficult role at the minute, what we're saying is with the market as it is, don't be afraid to recruit someone, even if they're the only person you've interviewed for the role. So you might only interview one person, but if they are, assess them against what you need from a role, not necessarily against other candidates, which I know in a perfect world we like to have a choice of candidates in the process, but with what we're seeing at the moment and the market and how competitive it is, if you've only got that one candidate and they fit the bill, don't be afraid to take them on.
Brilliant. And yeah, so that goes right back to getting a really clear, concise job specification. You're not comparing candidates to pick the best one. You are comparing a candidate against what you need. And if you've only got one, but it meets, as you say, fits the bill, then you probably aren't going to do any better than that. And perhaps that idea of having maybe Goldilocks, where you've got one who's too warm, one who's too cold, and one who's just right. If you get the one who's just right, don't wait for the other temperatures to arrive. So that is pretty much what we have noted has been going on. And so they are the key insights that we've drawn together. Anyone that hasn't worked with Euro projects before, or maybe hasn't worked with Euro projects recently, here's some things that might give you some heart. We don't just share great insights, but 100% of the people we place say they would recommend us. 96% of our business comes from repeat customers, and I'm absolutely delighted and very proud to see that one of the customers that we've got on this call's father was my first ever customer 27 years ago. So it's lovely to see that we're now working for the next generation of that family business. 81% of the people we place are still in post beyond a year. So, you know, we are trying our best to reduce your risk while we're recruiting, and that's the best way we can measure that. People are still in post later on, and it's not like, oh, we found someone that didn't work out, can you get us another? And if that does happen, we do it on a no quibble basis, by the way. We mentioned cultural fit earlier on. Strong cultural fit is what it's all about. We will take so much time to find out about what is the DNA of your business, so that we can find someone that matches that, as well as the technical or the professional skills that they may require. And I finished the point here with a mission statement that was written 27 years ago, which is that we want to provide the most friendly, professional and high quality service to our clients and candidates alike. And it's great to see that we've got both clients and candidates on this call today. If you do want to contact us, then I'm sure you've got a relationship with many of us that are from Euro projects on this call, but otherwise they are our contact details. And please, you know, anyone that knows us will know that we are not a taxi where the meter starts running as soon as you get in the cab. you can get in the cab and you can talk to the driver and you can get out if you don't like what the destination is. But, you know, we are here to help. And if that means ultimately we have a relationship where we can work together, that's brilliant. But we are very open to chatting with you or any of your friends if you so wish. And finally, on that note, what we do also do for a lot of our clients is we help your friends and children and nieces and nephews and wives and partners to be coached for any jobs that they might be going for. We don't have a hand in that, we don't earn from that, but we're just happy to help as many people as we possibly can. So that is, in a nutshell, what's happened in 2022, what's going to happen in 2023. I'm sure several of you will dig it out at the end of the year and remind me what I got wrong, but hopefully not too much. And that concludes the time. And as always, anyone on the call that's done this before knows I'm a stickler for timekeeping. I said I'd finish at 45 minutes past 2, and it is. So thank you very much. Thank you. All the best. Bye for now.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave.